Coming up on episode 276 of Wheel Bearings, we've got the Toyota Rav4 Adventure, the McLaren Artura. I tried out Tesla's full self-driving beta. GM's working with its dealers to put EV chargers in communities. Apple's delayed its car. IHS is trying to determine if its crash test facilities can handle heavy EVs. And Polestar and Mercedes are offering EV powertrain upgrades. All that and more coming up next. This is episode 276 of Wheel Bearings. I'm Sam Abul-Samad from Guidehouse Insights.
And I'm Roberto Baldwin from, let's say, Motor One this week.
And Nicole is still on vacation with her hubby in Europe. They're landing back in Boston, I think, late tomorrow night. And then she'll be home for a day and then off on another drive trip. And so next weekend, we'll all be back together.
Next weekend, it'll be exciting. It'll no longer just be the Sam and Robbie show.
All right, Robbie. You had some interesting stuff to drive this week. What did you drive?
I did. If you were listening to last week's episode, right in the middle, I just left.
Yeah.
So I left in order to go drive the McLaren Artura. This is McLaren's plug-in hybrid supercar. Now, they had hybrids before. They had the Speedtail, they had the P1, but those were those McLaren, like, we're going to make 3, and they're $70 billion. This is something that regular McLaren owners could buy if you're a regular McLaren owner.
So, as McLaren owners go,
McLaren owners go, it's the starting price is $200.
You and I could not afford one.
No, I could not afford this vehicle. $233,000. So let's just throw that out there. Just put her out there front. But driving it, no, it has a 7.5 kilowatt hour battery pack, so it's not a huge battery pack, and the EPA says 11 miles. McLaren says if you just driving around town, you probably get 15 miles. That's your EV only range. So it's not as nice to say a Rav4. A Rav4 Prime.
Which will do about 40 miles.
Which will do about 40 miles. But it's also way more fun to drive than a Rav4 Prime. I mean, it's still a McLaren, so they still are trying to keep it light. They're trying to keep it nimble. They're trying to keep it quick. And with this hybrid powertrain, they've been able to do that. The car is about 3,000 pounds. It's not very big. For a hybrid. A plug-in hybrid, 3,000 pounds is pretty much nothing. It has 671 horsepower, 530 pound-feet of torque. It has that EV low-end torque, so you can do 0 to 60 launches in 3 seconds, which at this point you're only seeing that number really when it comes to EVs. So you get that like low-end EV, and then the rest of the motor catches up. So you get that weird feeling when you take off in an EV where it like pushes your eyeballs, it squishes your eyeballs, it like reforms your internal organs, it pushes you get that from the McLaren while you're driving it around. Plus it's just really fun to drive. It's planted, the battery pack obviously lowers its center of gravity, but they have this twin turbo V6 in there, and the cylinder's at 120 degrees, so they're really low. It's almost like a boxer engine. Where so they're pretty low, and so that also lowers the center of gravity. So you have this car that's both elements are keeping it pretty low to the ground. So you have this car that's sort of stuck to the road, and I drove it in the desert around Las Vegas. And it was very fun, and nice long sweeping turns. And I was like, I wish there was something tighter. And then they took us to the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and they let us drive it on the track where there was a very, very busy circuit, lots and lots of tight turns, and the thing just sticks to the road. It's kind of crazy. Just I mean, it's a McLaren. I mean, they're race car people who decided to start making cars for regular-ish people about 11 years ago. So they have that lineage. In order to do all this, instead of just cramming, an EV battery, a battery pack into a regular McLaren, they created a brand new architecture. It's called the McLaren Carbon Lightweight Architecture, which, they have that carbon fiber tub that they're famous for, and they set it up so that it has space for a battery, and then they have, new front and back section that's lighter, it's tighter. The carbon fiber is stiffer, it's lighter than previous carbon fibers that they use in their vehicles, and it does all that, but it's also like super safe. That tub. There was a drive program a couple years ago where one of the journalists, he was with somebody who was new, which is something that's always terrifying to like automotive journalists, is getting a drive partner who's new. You've never met him before. They're young, typically a dude. For some reason they feel like they have something to prove, and this kid should not probably have been driving a McLaren because he launched it off the road at 70 miles an hour, and it tumbled, and they got it's the LA mountains, the mountains above Southern California, and they're upside down.
There's steep drop-offs there.
Yeah, there's some steep drop-offs, and the tub essentially protected them from like getting all smashed to hell. So yeah, so they're taking that, they take that technology for their race car teams, and they throw it in vehicles for regular-ish people who have a lot more money than you and I. It handles super tight. They don't have steering by wire. They're still using hydraulic assisted steering, which is awesome if you are a performance enthusiast. Drive by wire is still, it's mostly there. I think it's gotten much better. It used to feel like if you ever drove the i8, it felt like you were just playing a video game, like the steering. There's no feedback. You're just like, wee, turn left, you go left, turn right, you go right. You don't have any feedback from the road or from the tension of, how fast you're going versus, battling physics. So they're still using hydraulic assisted steering, which is nice. It is the first McLaren with adaptive cruise control. So you got that going for you. If you're the person who buys and dailies your McLaren, or you're going on a road trip, you have adaptive cruise control. It has lane keep assist, which is essentially just yelling at you when you're leaving your lane, but it doesn't engage the steering wheel at all.
So no active assist, just lane departure warning.
Yeah. So the assistance is just someone yelling at you. It's like a supervisor. They're not doing anything. They're just sort of yelling at you you're doing it wrong. They have an infotainment system. McLaren is not known for its infotainment system. You should not be excited about the infotainment system, outside of the fact that it's an 8-inch touchscreen and it supports CarPlay and Android Auto. That's what you should be excited about. You can adjust a bunch of things in the system, but once you've got it all set up, your car, you just plug in your phone and you'll be a lot happier. While they're building it, one of the things they wanted to do is make sure that it could do 40 minutes of performance driving without losing any EV performance, any electric performance. So they worked on that. That all said, $233,000 is really expensive. It's actually quite, you have electric, comfort, sport, and track mode. It's actually quite comfortable in comfort mode, which for a McLaren, if you've driven a 720, the GT is a pretty comfortable vehicle. That's what they built it for. This is like just a little bit below that on the comfort level. So you're going to get a nice, comfortable McLaren when you want it. So you got that going for you. And when you start it up, it always starts in electric mode, so you don't annoy your neighbors. So good for that. And it'll stay in electric mode till the battery's dead, or up to 81 miles an hour. And yeah, Sam, McLaren Artura. I'm a big fan. I had a lot of fun driving it. No one got any tickets while we were driving, so that's always good when you're driving McLaren. It surprisingly comfortable for a supercar, surprisingly light and nimble for a plug-in hybrid, and yeah, no, I mean they could have really kind of said, well, we're making a McLaren, making a hybrid, and didn't done a good job and made it work, but they've done a great job. Like, you don't even know, you don't even feel the battery pack. That's a big sign. That's a big thing. Is throwing. Well, I think it's not huge, but
yeah. Keeping it relatively modest at about 7.5 kilowatt hours, I'm sure helps. Obviously, if you put in like an 18 or 20 kilowatt hour battery like you might have in some other plug-in hybrids, then you would definitely start to feel it. Plus, it's a fairly small car, and packaging a battery that size in there along with an engine and everything would probably be challenging.
It was really small. It's that's one of the things, like the wheelbase is pretty short. But yeah, everything, it's just such a fun car. I mean, if you're rich, obviously, I mean, it's a fun car that I'll drive on drive programs, and I'm not going up. I haven't won the lottery. I'm not I don't have a.
You mean Motor One doesn't pay freelancers quite that much?
No. Who'd I do this for? Oh, it was on for Engadget. So I drove.
Oh.
So if you want to see, there's a video of me driving it around on Engadget. Yeah, no, it has a drift mode, so you can like adjust drift up to, I think, 15, 0 to 15% like levels of drift. So you got that going for you on a track. So even when they were handing out the cars, they're like, do not use drift mode on the roads. Please do not turn off the traction control on regular roads. We will be on the track later. You can do it there.
So McLaren has, typically has over the last decade had kind of like 3 different series of cars. They've had, I think it's the Sport Series is the lower end ones, the mainstream
supercar,
and then I forget what they call like the mid series, which is cars like the 720S.
Yeah, they just called them the supercars, essentially. Okay. I'm sure they showed me. I think they showed me a slide, but it's supercars is what it is.
And then they've had the limited production top end models like the P1 and the
Speedtail
and the Speedtail. Those, and the Senna, those that they make in runs of like 106 units, I think, because 106 is the number of the original McLaren F1s that they built back in the 90s. And so they did the same number for the Speedtail and the P1. So this replaces like the 650, 670 models in that entry level series.
No, this is this is a supercar.
Oh, so this isn't that mid range?
Yeah, no, this is definitely, it's not. It's a far more performance oriented than, say, like the GT. I think the GTs. This is definitely it is quick. It is nimble. It is not. When we were on the track, we had to switch cars during drive, and I got a car with cold tires.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, hey, we're going on track. Be careful. And the third turn is like got it sideways.
Yeah.
Because it's a supercar. It's got a lot of power. It's got cold tires. It's got And this is the thing that people don't. People who end up like wrecking their cars at Car and Coffee is that their car's been sitting this whole time, and then they're going to drive away, and they don't realize like there's so many things make your car like dangerous. Besides like just a bad stupid attitude and bad ideas. But like cold tires will throw you sideways really quickly when you have a lot of power. And this is it's got a lot of power, but it handles really well. And it's definitely a supercar. They're definitely going after the rest of the supercar lineup, and everyone else is coming out with their hybrid supercars eventually.
Okay. What was I gonna say? Oh, it's interesting, that they've opted for that wide angle 120 degree V6, which is the same configuration that Ferrari's using on the new 296. That's also a 120 degree V6 with the turbos mounted in the V above the engine, so it keeps it relatively narrow.
Yeah, they have the same thing. They have the hot V, and then below the cylinders are the intake the intakes. So the intakes are right below the cylinder, so they get those. Oh, I forgot to say that instead of using stamping, which they did, they used aluminum stamping. They also essentially use aluminum vacuum forming in order to get the doors for the body. And then so the panels on the door and the giant panel on the back of the car is actually vacuum formed aluminum. And so you can get these really nice, like pretty, like far more intricate designs using vacuum forming. So if you look at that door, it's super tight. It's got like a really, they don't. McLaren's run by just a bunch of engineers. It's just a bunch of race car nerds, and whenever you get in one, you're gonna notice it. It's definitely like the number one thing is making sure the car drives really well. And then there's like everything else, but everything is for that. That's why whenever you get in there, like, oh, it's got an infotainment system, sure,
Yeah.
because that is definitely not,
It's one of those things that customers expect, but they're not necessarily going to use in a car like this.
yeah, you're not going to see like MBUX level infotainment system.
No hyperscreens.
No hyperscreen. It's 8 inches. It's essentially looks like it looks like somebody just slapped an Android tablet onto the middle of the dash. The dash cluster though is super nice. It's really bright. It's got a high contrast. It's got it's super crisp. It's like one of the nicest dash clusters out there, and it's mounted directly to the steering column. So no matter where you put the steering wheel, you can
so it
see
moves,
everything.
like the old Porsche 928s.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of those just because I'm tall. So sometimes if I have the wheel down, I can't see the top of the steering wheel. And for cars that have in-car monitoring, some of them have in-car monitoring in the dash cluster at the very top. So suddenly the car's like, "Hey, you need to move your steering wheel." And I'm like, "Oh, jeez."
All right, cool. McLaren Artura. We'll definitely be putting in an order for one of those, I think.
Yeah, well, you know what? We'll get Nicole. We'll all put our money in, and we'll spend we'll each get it for a month.
Yeah, we'll just rotate it around. Between the three of us, we should be able to swing it, I think.
Yeah.
All right. I had something that was not quite as energetic, say, as the Artura. I had the Toyota Rav4 Adventure all-wheel drive.
But it's got an adventure in the name.
Yeah, it does. And it's a RAV4, which, for the past several years, since, ever since crossovers moved beyond midsize sedans as the most popular segment in the U.S. market besides trucks, the RAV4 has been the top-selling vehicle for Toyota in North America. And they... prior to the pandemic and then the supply chain shortage last year and this year, they were selling over 400,000 RAV4s a year, including more than a quarter of those being hybrids. The hybrid RAV4 is actually the best-selling Toyota hybrid now. The Adventure that I drove was not a hybrid.
Sorry.
It had just the base 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, 203 horsepower, 8-speed automatic transmission. So good there. No CVT in this one. Had a nice 8-speed, which is definitely better. And it has dynamic torque vectoring all-wheel drive, which is part of the Adventure package, which uses the brakes to send the torque around, hopefully where it'll do the most good to whichever wheels where it's most needed. It's not exciting, but if you need solid transportation for 4 or 5 people, that will probably run for 1 million miles as long as you do your regular oil changes and tire rotations and stuff. This is good. It's pretty basic. It does have adaptive cruise control and lane centering assist, blind spot monitoring. It had the one that I had an option package on there that includes that bumps the 7-inch center touchscreen to a 9-inch touchscreen.
Oh snap!
Hey, it's got more screen than the McLaren does for a fraction of the price. You get a whole extra inch of screen for and you save a ton of money getting it. So if you want more screen than you get in a McLaren Artura, the RAV4 is for you.
Yeah.
It's the engine, the powertrain is, especially in the non-hybrid, is it's fine. It's not particularly refined. It can be a little noisy sometimes. It's smooth enough. It just makes noises that aren't necessarily enticing or pleasant. It's not I've been in worse, but
I've been in worse, which is everyone.
it's fine. But the vehicle itself is solid. The ride quality is good. It's comfortable. It handles Michigan pavement, such as it is, with relative ease. It's got all the features that you want, in a modern, standard vehicle. It's got cameras all around. It's got something. It lists here on the Monroney, $269 for a drop ship indicator, whatever that means. Actually, that's part. Sorry, that's part of this other package with the two-tone roof. So this was a pale green with a black roof, and a drop ship indicator is included in that, and I don't know what that means.
I'm gonna look that up while you're talking.
It's not like they're picking this up from factory in China and drop shipping it to you. So I'm not really sure what that's referring to. It does have roof racks, roof rails, so you can tie stuff to the roof for a road trip and really add lots of extra drag, and reduce your fuel economy. And the fuel economy, it's rated at 28 miles per gallon combined. EPA rated, so 25 city, 33 highway. I did quite a bit of highway driving with it, wasn't beating this thing up, and it only averaged about 26, which was not that impressive. I think if I was buying a RAV4, I would probably be inclined to get a hybrid rather than this. The Adventure package.
Just get the Prime.
Yeah.
Prime it up. If you're going to do it, just go for it, man.
Especially for the price of this one. Grand total on this one came to $39,356, which, seems kind of high for what you're getting here. It doesn't feel particularly premium like a $40,000 car should. The base price on the Adventure is $33,700. And it's not like it. The Adventure. It's got black alloy wheels, and those roof rails. So it looks slightly more adventurous, but it's not. Doesn't really have the functionality. It's not going to compete with something like a Bronco Sport and its off-road capability. So I would probably go with a different trim level, like a hybrid XLE or a hybrid LE. Or the Prime. The Prime is just over $40,000, I think.
Yeah, $41,590.
Yeah, so for that kind of money, if you're going to spend nearly $40,000 anyway, get the Prime, get that 40 miles of electric driving range, and I think you'll be a lot happier with this because most of the time, the vast majority of the driving you're doing, the engine's not going to be running anyway, and so you're not going to hear the kind of coarse tone of the engine, and you'll get a lot better efficiency, and your operating costs will be a lot lower as long as you plug it in every night. So the Rav4 Prime or the Rav4 Adventure, almost $40,000. You want to take a guess at the delivery charge?
$1,300.
$1,215.
Oh, I'm pretty close.
And this one was built in.
I feel like I still win
Ontario.
I'm the only one here.
So this one's built in Canada. They also build Rav4s, I think, in Indiana as well, and then the Primes come from Japan. So yeah, I mean, it's a solid, compact crossover. Competes against the likes of the CR-V and the Escape and the Hyundai Tucson. But like I said, I don't think I would opt for this particular configuration.
Yeah, I tell people to get the Prime all the time. They're like, "Well, I need to do it." I'm like, "Just get the Prime," because they want an SUV. Everyone wants an SUV. They want, and value wise, CR-V, Rav4. I'm like, just get one of those. Get a hybrid of one of those. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna be a happy camper.
Yeah, and when I've had the hybrid Tucson or the hybrid Rav4s, I've always gotten around 40 miles per gallon with them. So it's going to cost you a lot less for gas with one of the hybrids, and even less if you get the Prime.
Yeah, and most of the time you're just cruising around town, doing your errands, maybe heading to where 40 was it 40 miles now? What's the
Yeah.
it's 40
Last time I had the Prime, I ran it on my test loop and got 40, almost 43 miles on it last time.
Yeah, 42 miles according to the EPA, so 43. Yeah, so it's even in, it's the real world too. You're getting over 40 miles. Man, just get that. You're not doing adventure stuff in a RAV4.
Yeah.
There's two types of adventure. There's people who are like, oh, you know what? I have a lot of snow. I have like real like off dirt roads I have to deal with. But those are Subaru owners. They're like the sort of like, okay, I really like logical. And then there's, I'm gonna go do all these crazy things, and they never do. And those are Bronco and Jeep owners.
Yeah.
And they're and if you were one of those Bronco or Jeep owners who actually are who actually goes off road and does it, I applaud you, because you are the reason those cars are built. But if you're whatever. I mean, I never take my BRZ to a track.
Yeah. So that's the RAV4. Get the basic one. Don't get the Adventure, or step up. And if you're gonna spend that money, get the Prime instead.
Yeah, throw a battery in there.
Yeah.
RAV4, better with a battery. That's what
That should be the tagline.
Toyota RAV4, better with a battery.
Yeah. Did you know you can support Wheel Bearings directly? Head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia and you can become a patron today. Your contributions will help fund the platforms and tools we use to bring the podcast to you. And exclusives and improvements are already on the way thanks to your generosity. So if you want to be part of an automotive podcast like no other, head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia. All right. This week, I also had the opportunity to meet up with a friend that owns a Tesla Model 3. And until about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, Tesla was requiring owners that wanted to get into the full self-driving beta program to get a score. They have a safety score that the car calculates based on your driving patterns, based on how hard you accelerate and brake and things like that. And in order to get into the beta program, you had to have a score of at least, I think it was 97 or 98 out of 100. And this owner was not quite there. Let's put it that way. Let's leave it at that. But a couple of weeks ago, they decided, well, you know what? We got to book some extra revenue by the end of the quarter. And so we're going to make FSD beta available to all the people who paid us $15,000 or somewhere between $5,000 and $15,000 over the last 5 years in order to get this, so we can book that revenue and get some profits this quarter, because we might not get it otherwise. And so no matter what your safety score is, you can now get the FSD beta. And so I reached out to my friend and said, hey, love to give this a shot. I've never had an opportunity to
give it a roll.
Try this out. They said, yeah, come on over. And so we went for a drive. Let's just say my previous suspicions from watching videos of other people with FSD beta is that this software should not be on public streets in the hands of consumers. It does basic things like keeping the car centered in the lane and even doing lane changes. Does that just fine, But I mean, Autopilot has done that fine for years.
Yeah,
and other systems like Super Cruise
years?
do it fine.
4, 5, 6 years.
It's been over 6 years since they announced FSD.
Yeah.
It was October 2016 when they announced it, and at that time, I'll include a link to that conference call. But basically, the first sentence out of Musk's mouth on that conference call is, "Every Tesla we're building now." And this was in October 2016. He said, "Every Tesla we're building now has everything we need for full level 5 autonomy, and all we have to do is update the software." And level 5 means that it can operate without supervision, without anybody in the vehicle, without intervention, under all conditions.
I was at that event. It was like me and just maybe 8 other people, and he just sort of appeared out of a side room, sort of disheveled. And I was like,
"Oh, so his normal look."
Yeah. You're like, this is kind of a big deal. And he just sort of appeared and then disappeared back into a side door, and I'm like, all right. And then they let us drive the car.
So it's not capable of self-driving. It's it's a decent driver assist system, but there are still way too many scenarios where it just has no idea what to do. And this often includes you go to different cities, different regions, and you'll find different road configurations. Some places you'll find more roundabouts. Other places, you have different kinds of stuff, different ways that they set up the roads and the rules of the road. And here in Michigan, we have a phenomenon known as the Michigan left turn. And so on some major thoroughfares like Woodward Avenue and Telegraph Road in the Detroit area, or Jackson Road in Ann Arbor, these are wide roads, typically, three lanes in each direction with a center median. And in order to improve traffic flow and safety, instead of allowing left turns off of these roads, at various intersections, direct left turns, what they force you to do is kind of drive just past the road that you want to turn on, and there will be a cutout in that center median. And so basically another left turn lane where you can do a U-turn. And so typically, you would go, 50 or 100 yards past the intersection, go into this left turn lane, do a U-turn, come back and make a right turn onto that road instead of doing a left. And when we tried this on Woodward Avenue at several locations, the car would get over to the main left lane, slow down as it approached this turn lane, and then it's like it had, I don't know what to do with this, and so it would speed up and go on to the next one. And it would, and then it would come up on another one, another quarter mile or half a mile down the road. It's like, I don't know what to do with this. And it would just keep going until it finally got to a spot where there was just a normal place where it could make a normal left turn. And then it made the left turn, looped through a neighborhood, and finally came back to Woodward Avenue. And this is just one of the things. Another thing that I didn't see, but that the owner told me about was he was in downtown Detroit near Huntington Place Convention Center, and on Jefferson Avenue, this is the facility formerly known as Cobo Center, and if you're heading west on Jefferson towards the convention center, as you approach the convention center, about a block away, the road actually splits, and the two, so it's 4 lanes, and the 2 right lanes. It's 3 lanes. The center lane splits. The right lanes go straight ahead until you get to the convention center. Then you have to turn right onto Washington Avenue. The lanes on the left go down through a tunnel underneath the convention center and come up on the Lodge Freeway. And he said that the first time he tried it, he was in the center lane approaching this, and it went to the right. And it thought it was, I guess it thought it was going through the tunnel and just went straight and didn't even start to slow down as it was actually approaching the building, approaching the convention center. He had to intervene and hit the brakes.
All right. I know exactly where that's at. That took me a second to figure to my brain. Yeah. You just slam right straight into the convention center.
Yeah. The next time, it's like it was trying to emulate back in the early 90s when they launched the original Jeep Grand Cherokee and drove it through the glass doors of the convention center. It's like it wanted to drive up the steps through the glass doors. The next time, so from there he looped back around, tried it again. The next time it went left. It was in the same lane. He went left and went down through the tunnel. And then he looped it again, came back around again. The third time it did the first thing. It went to the right again. So one of the fundamental problems with a system, or one of the fundamental things you have to do with a system like this, or any driver assist system, and I learned this back in the early 90s when I was working on ABS. One of my boss at the time, we were evaluating the system I was working on, and so the thing you really have to do with any system like this is, whether it's behaving perfectly or not, what's more important is that it behaves consistently. It's got to be predictable for the driver.
Yeah.
So no matter what, you get into any given situation, the driver has to know how the system's going to respond. And in this case here, it was unpredictable, and there were a lot of scenarios where it was very unpredictable. Where sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't, and it's just not ready to be used by the public. They need to stop this beta testing with the public. This is not the way to do it because it's dangerous. In fact, so much so that the owner of the car, after a couple of days, he went out and got a student driver sticker and put it on the back of on the trunk lid because it was so it did a lot of things like like a 16-year-old just learning how to drive would do, randomly hitting the brakes and doing all kinds of other things.
Yeah.
And rather than get rear-ended, he wanted to provide a warning to anybody following him that, hey, this car might do something weird. So he put a student driver sticker on there.
I've been in Teslas, and at the time, this is like 3-4 years ago, it was the best ADAS system on the road, but also the one with the most, where I was most likely to have something weird happen. Like almost every Tesla I've ever been in, something just weird happens when ADAS is in, when the driver's assistance system is on. Like it's just phantom braking, like just weirdness, like just weird thing. And that's what happens when you kind of turn everything up to 11, which is what Tesla essentially did when they first launched autopilot. They just took a system and they just turned it all the way up. Yeah. And so we're like, hey, look what we've done. And all the other automakers are like, you just turned up the Bosch system to 11. You didn't really do anything. You just like sort of removed some of the, it's. So, now they have their own system and they continually, removing sensors in order to save money. And that's really the reason why you're doing it is, you're trying to get as much profit out of every vehicle as possible. And that's the thing. And they've come up with this idea where if they put all the hardware on every Tesla and then they just hope that you turn it on and you pay for it, that's sort of and that helps. It reduces complexity in manufacturing, which especially when they were brand new, you don't want like 5 different types of Model 3 going down the line. If you got 2 types of Model 3, they all have all the hardware, and one has one battery pack and the other has another. But you can sell it as 5 different models or whatever. That's going to save you money, but you're also losing money if people aren't turning those, aren't turning on the software packages that you're selling. And I think at some point they're like, well, we're not selling enough of these FSDs, so they just kept raising the price to like, was it $15,000 now?
Yeah, it's $15,000 now.
$15,000. You could buy a nice used car for $15,000.
Or you can subscribe for $200 a month.
Or you can $200 a month is a lot of money. Mm-hmm. That's
more than a lot of people can afford for a car payment.
Yeah, and so you're paying a lot of money for a system on a car where they just keep pulling sensors off, and you're just like, well, I understand financially why they're doing this, but like you said, consistency. One of the things about when you ride a motorcycle, you want people to do the thing that you think they're going to do. And sometimes people will see someone ride a motorcycle and they'll try to be helpful in some way. Don't. Just do what you were going to do. If it's your turn at the light, go. If it's your turn at the stop sign, go. Don't try to like, oh, well, let me just let you go. Because it's the motorcyclists do not like that. I had a friend, he would just turn his motorcycle off if the person refused to go.
Yeah.
When it was their turn. He's like because when you introduce like these inconsistencies on the road or behind the wheel, like it just makes things really complicated. Just do the thing you're supposed to do when you're behind the wheel, and the car should just do the thing that everyone expects it to do when it's driving. And when it's like sort of all over the place, you can't trust it. And I talked to a guy on the plane coming back from I don't know wherever, some country, and he has a Model S, and he has a Plaid, and he's like the driver assistance is not great, and his wife refuses. She won't even turn it on. She absolutely hates that car. Just because of that. Because he's like, it's all over the place. He's like, spent all this money on this system that doesn't really work that great.
Yeah.
And so, outside of, I'm sure there's people who use it and they absolutely love it. And they're like, it's the best thing ever. But a lot of the people who are on Twitter who would use it and love it, either A, are sycophants, or B, they have a vested interest in Tesla, which means they have a lot of money invested in Tesla, which, if you put a lot of money into a company, you want that company to do well. And if you can, argue that company should be, is doing well on Twitter, then you might as well.
Yeah. And to be fair, Tesla is not the only one of late, that has had challenges with some of this inconsistent behavior. I mean, I've complained about Ford's Blue Cruise, and the biggest complaint I have with Blue Cruise, well, one of the major complaints I have with Blue Cruise is also inconsistent behavior. You're driving down a highway and you're approaching a curve, and this is one that hopefully the new update of Blue Cruise will address. But as you approach a curve, in many instances, it'll tell you to put your hands back on the wheel, because it doesn't. It so far, at least, it hasn't had predictive speed control where it uses the map to judge the radius of that curve and slow the truck down as you approach that curve, and then speed back up the way GM's Super Cruise does.
Yeah.
Blue Cruise didn't do that, and so you're constantly having to, be wary of when you have to put your hands back on the wheel and retake control, and especially with a less than ideal user interface for it in terms of knowing when you need to take control. That inconsistency is one of my big complaints with it. That and speaking of the interface, that's another problem with the Tesla, especially in the Model 3 and the Model Y. Less so in the S and X, because they actually have an instrument cluster in front of the driveway, in front of the driver where it belongs. On the S and the X, you just have some small icon, or on the Y and the 3, you just have some small icons in the upper left-hand corner of the center screen, and to let you know when it's engaged or when you need to take control back. And given that they tell you that you have to keep your hands on the wheel and eyes on the road when you're using the system, the fact that you have to look away from the road, over and down at the screen to see, what mode it's in, and, whether you need to, be in full control or just let it do its thing, I think is also a bad user interface design. And I would have less of an issue with Tesla using just the center screen if they would at least offer a heads-up display. So you could put that information in the heads-up display. But they don't even offer a heads-up display on any of their models, which I think is also problematic.
Yeah, it's mode confusion, which if you don't know what mode you're in, you're just driving and you're like, oh, the car's going to slow down, and then it doesn't.
Right.
Because you don't know what mode you're in. Now that's a huge. I mean, that's why I remember when they showed off the Cadillac with Super Cruise the first time, it had those little lights on the steering, the little light at the top of the steering wheel, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen." And then I drove it like however many months later. I was like, "Oh, this is awesome. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen."
You know exactly what mode it's in. If it's green, you're good to go, hands free. If it's red, you got to put your hands on the wheel, and blue, it's ready to go whenever you want to take your hands off.
Yeah, it's. I mean, this whole thing is like super difficult, and I think everyone thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was. And they're like, we're 90% there, and they're like, yeah, but that last 10% is, I'm 90% there to being a good guitarist because I know how to tune a guitar. I'm not a good guitarist. That last 10% is that's to be the Eddie Van Halen of guitar. That's decades and decades of work.
Yep. All right. Next up, GM this week made an announcement about their dealer community charging program. They actually first announced this last year, and it's a program where they're encouraging their dealers to sign up, especially dealers in rural areas, away from major cities, where there typically isn't a lot of public charging infrastructure. And what GM is doing is, for dealers that sign up, they will supply them with up to 10 19 kilowatt level 2 chargers that can be installed around the community. So it's not for chargers at the dealerships, but to put them in other locations around the community. And so the dealers work with site owners, and GM participates in this as well. And GM provides the chargers, and then depending on where you are, in some cases, in partnership with the site owners and the dealers, sometimes the charging will be free. Sometimes they may charge for it. There's still, that will vary depending on the location, just as it does for a lot of other level 2 public charging, like a lot of the charge point chargers, Blink, and so on. Sometimes it's free. Sometimes you have to pay a fee. And they've got the first of those installed now. The first ones were with a dealer in central Wisconsin, northwest of Madison. They've put some chargers in there, some 19 kilowatt chargers, and so 19 kilowatts is pretty fast. Something like a Chevy Bolt. You can charge it up in about 4 hours, 3.5 hours at a 19 kilowatt charger, and then they, like I said, GM will provide up to 10 chargers, and about over 1,000 of their dealers, of their 4,000 dealers, have signed up for this program. They also have some installed in a town called Owasso near Flint, and there's a lot more coming over the next several months. So that's their dealer community charging program.
I mean, it's going to help the dealers sell the cars because the infrastructure is the big and I know we always talk about range anxiety. It's really charging anxiety. People are just like, what do I charge? What do I 19 kilowatts. That's
pretty fast for an AC.
It's pretty
charger.
quick. Yeah, you throw that. And there are, when I was in the early days of EVs, back when I was reviewing them in San Francisco, where there's like 0 chargers. Like I was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna go do some shopping at Walgreens because that was the only place I could go to a charging station. And so what happens is you're driving around, you're like, oh, I need to charge my car. Oh, this supermarket has a chargers and this one doesn't. Well, why don't I just go to this supermarket? Because I can charge while I'm buying my groceries for the week, and this mall has charging, but this mall doesn't. And malls are essentially the same. You either want whatever pretzel, both the pretzel places and was Aunt Annie's.
Get your pretzels and your Cinnabons and your
your Wetzel's pretzels, your Aunt Annie's. They're essentially the same pretzel, and so it doesn't matter what mall you go to. But no, I mean this helps, and it gives the the dealership gets to feel warm and cuddly for helping their community. The people who are looking for EVs feel better because they can see chargers out in their community. And of course GM gets to put out this press release, but I went to Norway a few years ago to drive the some Mercedes SUV that was supposed to come here, the EV, the
EQC.
EQC that never ended up not coming here. But just driving around Norway, you're like, there's chargers they're all along the street, they're just everywhere, and I'm like, this is kind of what everything needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're just like, you just pull up at a spot and you just plug in your charger and you go on your way. I think we're going to see a lot more of that sort of, hopefully, especially in cities and stuff. But like out in the middle of nowhere, again, I think I was talking to you before the podcast. There's like 3 EA stations within 5 miles of my house. I live in Northern California. It's fine. We're fine. I have to go check to see the EV Go station. They put in some new ones that's between me and one of the EA stations. That's 2 miles from my house. So a mile away is an EV Go, and then an extra mile is like an EA station. So I'm doing okay. But meanwhile, in other parts of the country, not so much. And so this really helps.
Well, my local EA station down the street here, they just finished installing brand new chargers there. They ripped out the old ones that were so problematic, and 5 of the 6 chargers, they left the one that had a CHAdeMO connector on it, but the other 5 chargers have all been replaced with brand fancy new chargers, but they haven't been turned on yet. So hopefully next time I have a plug-in, an EV to charge to drive, then those things will be turned on and I can go see if they actually work.
Cool. Yeah, the ones near my house are relatively new, so they haven't. I keep looking because I want to see the new chargers. I think I saw somewhere they were like working on them, but yeah, near my house. Let's see. There's one there. There's one there. There's one there. There's one there. I just pulled up a map. I mean, they're not everywhere. There's within, I don't know, like a 30-mile radius is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're on the other side of the bridge. Yeah, there's like 7 EAs. Oh, well, 8 actually. There's 8 EA chargers near my house, so I'm okay. And that's not counting EV Go and then of course Charge Point, which is usually a little bit lower, but they've been putting out high-speed DC fast chargers too. So
Yeah, well, the
It's
gas
getting
station
there.
near me here that just put in a couple of charge point DC chargers this summer.
Oh, cool.
Used one of those. Yeah, they're only 150 kilowatt, but that's that's fine
But
for most
still,
people. Yeah.
yeah. So there was a Valero up the street from my house that I would walk to every day, and I became friends with the ladies, especially during COVID, because it was like I'm just gonna walk to the store. They shut down to become a 7-Eleven, and everything in there was 7-Eleven branded. It just wasn't 7-Eleven brand. So like, oh, they're gonna they're like, oh, we're remodeling the store, and I'm like, well, how long is that gonna take? They're like, a year, and I'm like, a year, and then they just demolished the store and then rebuilt another building like 30 feet over. But I keep driving by. They have a fence around it, and I'm kind of hoping, because it's a gas station. I'm kind of hoping that they also put a charging station. I mean, I have charging at home, but every time I see something new, especially with gasoline, I'm like, just throw some charging in there. Put
I'm
coffee machine
actually
in.
surprised. There's a brand new gas station that just opened up a couple of months ago nearby here, where there used to be a gas station that closed like 15 years ago, and they demolished it and tore out the old tanks, and they just built a brand new gas station there, and I'm really surprised, and with a nice convenience store and everything, I'm surprised they didn't put any chargers in there.
It's throw some chargers in, put a little tables outside, and you're gonna have people just hanging out at your gas station buying a lot more stuff, which is how you're making money anyway.
At least in the warm weather months. I don't think people are going to hang out at those tables in the wintertime here.
Yeah, I live in California. Well, it's like 30 something degrees outside, but we don't care. We're just like, oh, whatever.
All right. Are you excited for an Apple car? Are you planning to get an Apple car?
So, the Apple car. I used to be the online editor, so I ran the website for all the news for a Mac site, for Mac Life, which used to be Mac Addict as part of the Future Publishing. I was, I started, well, I didn't start my technology, my journalism career, but, a big part of my journalism career was in tech, and a big part of that was covering Apple. After that, I covered Apple for like Gizmodo, and I covered Apple for Wired, I covered Apple for I covered Apple for a long time. And this damn Apple car has been around like almost the entire time. It's either the rumors or just like wishes. And I even wrote an article at Engadget. I'm like, if Apple wants to do a car, they can. They have the money. They have, but what they want to do, just make an autonomous car. Like, why? Who cares? It's, okay. And just a pure like level 5 autonomous car for someone to buy. No one's going to buy that because you can just have a taxi come to your house. B, if they do make one that is a taxi, I was talking to the CTO of Mercedes, and like, and I asked about taxis. He's like, are you going to wait 5 minutes longer for a Mercedes branded taxi? Like, no. He's like, why would you do that? He's like, there's no reason for that. And plus, most of Europe is littered with Mercedes brand, Mercedes taxis. So I don't know if they can just make a car. I mean, it says they're pulling back on they're making it level 5, which means it has no wheels. It has, not no wheel. It doesn't have a steering wheel
or pedals.
No steering wheel or pedal. They're, level 4, which is steering wheel and pedal, and then, autonomous whenever you want it. And then level 3 obviously that's autonomous in very select areas, like which is what Mercedes is trying to launch right now. But I mean, sure.
Back in 2015 when it first, the news about Project Titan, which is Apple's car program, first leaked out, I wrote a series of articles, on my personal blog back at the time, and I'll include a link to that. On why I didn't think that Apple would ever actually build a car. First off, the profit margins in the auto industry are peanuts compared to what Apple likes.
Super slim. Like, Apple makes bazillions of dollars. Why would they?
Apple's a company that likes 35 to 40% profit margins. Exactly. Nobody in the auto industry makes 35 to 40% profit margins. And then you also have the problem of how do you actually sell them? Apple's not a company that is likely to embrace franchise dealers.
No.
Then you have challenges with the direct to consumer model like Tesla and Rivian and others do. Because you still have to have some service locations and you have somewhere to deliver the cars. And it would also limit where they could do it if they wanted to do direct to consumer. And I actually did speculate that, if they were going to do something, that the way for them to do it would be to do a premium robotaxi service. Because the other thing that Apple doesn't like is they don't like people messing with their stuff. They don't like them modifying their stuff. Even if you buy it, if you buy an iPhone, you buy a Mac, Apple does not like you making modifications to that stuff. And so what I speculated that they would probably do is do a robotaxi that they retain ownership of. That way they don't have to mess with dealers. They don't have to mess with distribution. They can limit where they're deployed to markets where there is a significant affluent consumer audience that would be willing to pay a premium price for that. And maybe do it as a subscription instead, so you could get rides anytime you need, things like that. And they retain control, and it never gets modified. They have struggled apparently to develop an automated driving system. I mean, as much as I don't like the driver intervention data that California requires autonomous companies to submit every year, if you look at that data from Apple versus everyone else, their numbers are pretty bad in terms of number of miles between interventions. Apple's got a lot of interesting technology that could benefit them in developing automated systems. Their Apple Silicon chips are incredibly powerful. It would be a great platform for them to use. They've done a lot of interesting stuff with sensors, but now the latest report out of Bloomberg is that the whole program has been pushed back to at least 2026, and they've largely given up on the idea of doing a robotaxi or a completely self-driving vehicle. And it's going to be a more conventional electric vehicle with a price starting at a minimum of $100,000.
Which we have enough $100,000 EVs, to be honest. I mean, I understand. I mean, if the goal is the sort of Tesla model, or really even the Mercedes model, which is like you put all the tech in the most expensive vehicle and then you wait for it to work its way down, you keep introducing cheaper and cheaper models with the tech that you showed off 3 years ago in a more expensive model. That's great. And if Apple can do that, if Apple can come out by 2030 with a $25,000 EV, awesome. That's great. Good. I'll be very happy. But it's like you said, like the profit margins are sort of like not great. It's becoming an increasingly crowded market. I mean, Tesla's feeling the squeeze. You can just look at what they're doing in China, and even here, and their stocks are kind of being punished for that. And so it's a sort of a thing. They have just momentum, I think. I think it's just inertia within Apple that we're going to do this thing. And there's been 50 executives that have worked on it over the years, like automotive executives that have sort of come and gone. And I think they show up and they're like, oh, we're going to do this great thing. I'm working with Apple. And then they're like, we would have already shown this off at the auto show if I had been working at GM or Toyota or whatever. So
I think if Apple really wants to do this, what they should do is just buy Lucid.
Yeah, no, and that would, that's.
They already have a factory. They're up and running. They've got product, really good product. Just buy Lucid, and that's the kind of product that would fit within the Apple ecosystem.
Yeah, and it's full of Apple employees.
Yeah,
they're the CTO or not the main engineer of the software is like a bunch of Apple employees when they did the recent upgrade.
Yeah, Mike Bell.
Yeah, Mike Bell, super nice guy. Big nerd, so we hit it off great. but he's just like, I worked at Apple. We know how to ship software, and that's Apple. Software is, that's what's having problems. Volkswagen has problems with software. Everyone has problems with software. Lucid had problems with software. Then they got Mike Bell in there and a bunch of ex-Apple employees, and then they rewrote the code. So, if you buy something. Maybe implement some of your stuff into it, and then hopefully, bring the price down to. I mean, really, I mean, again, we have enough expensive EVs. I mean, I like driving them, but the rest of us need electric cars.
Yeah. Speaking of which, IHS, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, they do a lot of crash testing of vehicles. They have their own crash test facility, and they do the top safety picks every year. They were a little concerned as to whether their crash test facilities would hold up with some of the very heavy new EVs that are coming to market, and they specifically were wondering, could this facility withstand a 9,500 pound EV? Gee, who makes a 9,500 pound EV? Oh yeah, GM, the Hummer EV.
Listen, it's a moonshot. They got a lot of moon iconography inside the car. It's really to be driven on the moon, where it's only like 6,500 pounds.
Yeah. So they took an old F-150 and they loaded it up with concrete blocks and steel plates, to bring it up to 9,500 pounds. And they did a crash test with it to see if they're, because the way the crash test facilities work, they basically have a cable buried in the floor, and they hook it up to the bottom of the vehicle, and they accelerate it down a long runway to get it up to the test speed, and then let it go as it hits just as it hits the barrier. And so they accelerated it up to 40 miles an hour. Fortunately, it had no problem at all handling a 9,500 pound F-150, which is about twice its normal weight. So they're looking forward to finally testing some of these big EVs in the not too distant future. Yeah,
no, they're heavy.
Yeah.
That's and so it's we're trading one issue for another, and people are like, oh well, they're heavy and they're bad on the roads. I'm like, well, yeah, so are big trucks and other things that are on the roads, and so I don't know.
I actually saw a Carrier the other day with a couple of Hummers on it, and those things are so heavy that they only carry two at a time.
They're heavy. It's a Hummer. I know we can sit there and make fun of it being like just how ridiculous, but you know what? It's always been ridiculous. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger wanted a Hummer one day, and that's where this all started. It's all Arnold's fault. He was a big environmentalist, and he was he was a Republican governor of California, but the Republican governor of California is essentially like a Democrat everywhere else in the country. So, yeah. But yeah, no, it's go watch the sort of the video of this car, because it's just like it just shows you just like all the insanity of the weight as it just sort of flies through the the cabin. Yeah. And it's this is not indicative of what will happen with an EV, because the batteries are at the bottom, blah blah blah. But still, I don't know. It's just sort of crash videos and crash are the funnest things ever to watch.
Yeah, there's some wild ones out there. One of my favorite ones was I don't know, about 10, 15 years ago. Mercedes did a crash test, a 2-car crash test with an E-Class and a Smart, and did a small offset head-on crash test with a Smart and an E-Class, and because they were wondering how do these two very different cars interact with each other. And it turned out that even though the Smart, doesn't have much in the way of crush zones, it's so small and light that it basically just bounces off the E-Class and goes flying off to the side.
There was a video of ramming a Smart 70 miles an hour into a concrete barrier,
mm-hmm.
and afterwards, like, you could still open and close the doors. Like, that's how. It was sort of like, I remember people like, oh, they're not very safe. I'm like, I want you to go watch this video. Because that's the engineering that went into that little thing. I mean, but it's it doesn't help you when you're driving around in a Smart and everyone's driving around in Tahoes.
Yeah. All right. Finally, Polestar and Mercedes in the last couple of weeks have both announced power-up options for their EVs, where you can pay a little extra money and get some extra performance. A few weeks back, I talked about the Polestar 2 Performance that I was driving, which had an extra 68 horsepower compared to the standard dual motor Polestar. Well, now if you buy the standard dual motor Polestar, you can get that extra 68 horsepower for, I believe it's about $1,600.
1,200.
1,200. Okay.
Yeah.
So $1,200, and yeah, $1,195. So fortunately, in the case of Polestar, it's a one-time payment. You pay the $1,200, you get the extra 68 horsepower. Mercedes is doing it a little bit differently. They're making it an annual fee to get the extra power on the EQS and the EQE, I think. And I think it's about I think they're the ones that were charging $1,600 a year. So you get an extra 100 horsepower, but you have to keep paying for it in perpetuity.
Yeah, I think I don't know why Mercedes is doing this, because I mean, we all just hammered on BMW for years about CarPlay, and that was way less expensive. Just because you could get a Hyundai with CarPlay for as either as an option and now as standard, but you only paid for it once. You pay for it once and then you move on. And Mercedes oh, everyone will be fine with this, but they're not. They're not fine with it. Just set it as a one-time fee. As a one-time fee, everyone's oh, okay, cool, yeah, I can totally. If someone's, I want 68 more horsepower in my Polestar 2, would you have $200? You know what? Fine, I'll do it. It's like putting mufflers and a header on your old car. You probably paid, you probably pay that much, $600 for the extra 3 horsepower back in the day. But they're oh, well, if you just pay a couple $100 a month. No, don't, no, because we're already. It's like death by 1,000 subscriptions at some point. We're subscribed to so many things, and Care by Volvo, I think is really smart. It's a subscription service, but you're getting the whole car. It's not, the subscription stuff for some of the car stuff I understand. Like if FSD, when that works, or Super Cruise, if you don't want to have it all the time, you want to pay $50 because that month your family's going on a long road trip. Great, I can understand that, but just for power, just no, because no one's paying for power for a month and then hey, look what I can do, and then yeah. So Mercedes is also charging $1,200, but it's an annual subscription, and on the EQE 350, it raises the power from 215 to 260 kilowatts, so you get an extra 45 kilowatts, so about 60 horsepower. So it's about the same increase as you get with the Polestar, but you have to pay it every year that you want to keep it. Every
year, not
just once.
You go back to being just a little bit slower.
But then it
takes you an extra second to get to 60 miles an hour.
But then, of course, you have to understand: is this linked to the car, or is it linked to the owner? If I sell this car later,
guess it's almost certainly linked to the owner.
So when I go to when you go, this happened with Model S's when people are selling them on the used Model S's, people would buy them. They were selling them as it has autopilot, which at the time was still an option, and then you sold it as one of the options, autopilot, and then people would buy it, and then Tesla would retroactively turn off autopilot. Hey, I paid for autopilot for this car, which is just okay. So now so now you're making the owner who's trying to sell the car determine whether or not the things that he or she has already paid for are going to go with the car, and then the people who are buying the car, they have to figure out well, if I buy this with this extra power, am I keeping the extra power, or am I going to lose the extra power? It becomes this whole really confusing thing. I really think it should just be linked to the vehicles, but that's that's just for the sake of ease of confusion.
But then
lack of confusion.
You don't make as much profit then.
Yeah, you can't double up on it.
Yeah.
But then then you have people having to deal with it's a whole.
All right, let's answer a couple of questions. First up from Mark Shakespeare. Stellantis dealers in every city here in Northwest Arkansas: Jeeps, Rams, Dodges, Chrysler, and even one Fiat dealer, but no Alfa Romeo dealer within 250 miles. In this situation, owning a new Giulia with a warranty seems to be pointless, so I've been considering a well-optioned, pre-loved 2019-2020 2-liter turbo Giulia. I note a little warranty left and relying on finding a good independent mechanic, though so far not found a shop that mentions specializing in modern Alphas. Is owning a Giulia so far away from a trained Alpha mechanic asking for trouble? I wrote the same kind of question on a popular Giulia forum, and even there they said I would need to be close to a solid dealer. Everyone says the Giulia is a great driver's car, and it seems a favorite with the journalists, even though it's not a wagon. Look forward to hearing words of wisdom from the Wheel Bearings Car Therapy team.
I love the Giulia.
Yeah, me too.
I love that car so much. I would not buy it if I wasn't near a dealer. And that's such. I mean, there are plenty of Giulias on the road that have had zero problems. But I know if I bought one in Northwest Arkansas, I know within like 3 months something weird would happen, and then I'd have to like trailer it for 300 miles, 6 hours away in order to.
He does mention that there is a Fiat dealer nearby.
I mean, you can reach out to the dealership and see if they have.
Yeah, that's what I would do is ask the Fiat dealer or ask the other Stellantis dealerships, if they will do service on a Giulia. Certainly, they can definitely get parts for it. The challenge is whether their technicians have the training, and are familiar with the car to do the diagnostics and to do the service on it. The Alpha dealer or the Fiat dealer is probably your best bet in this case to see if they're able to do it. If not, if they can't do service, just because the number of modern Alphas that have been sold is not huge in the U.S. In an area like this, the number of them around, the mechanics that.
You're going to be a unicorn if you have one. You're going to be like one of like 3 people.
Yeah, I mean, the number of mechanics that are likely to know how to work on one are probably pretty slim. So I would probably avoid it unless you move somewhere else. All right, the other question we had this week was from Bryn Berenshausen. And he says, hey guys, had a thought about plug-in hybrids. I owned a standard hybrid, Prius, and a BEV, a Model 3, and I can't say I'd actually want a plug-in hybrid. I get why on paper they seem like a good idea, but they're expensive, complicated, and don't get the real benefits of an EV because it's still the hybrid powertrain. Why has the standard for these been a tiny battery with a gas engine that powers the wheels instead of a full electric powertrain with a mid-sized battery and a gas motor that just acts as a generator? This would give the better driving experience and efficiency from the electric motors with the extended range from the gas without the complexity of the internal combustion engine and transmission. A bigger battery, say around 40 kilowatt hours, would make it a more appealing package in my opinion. My commute is longer than most PHEVs range, and I'd still want more EV range for moderate road trips than these currently offer. I think BMW did this with the i3. Train locomotives have done this, and it's the approach Edison Motors is taking for big rig trucks. Why hasn't it been tried for passenger cars?
Cost. Just write down. You're throwing that battery is so much more is going to make that because you're already talking about expensive. If you're throwing a 40 kilo, you're like you're throwing like a lot more money at that car in order to get the hybrid system.
Yeah,
that you're talking about.
Yeah, basically what Bryn's describing for the listeners is a series hybrid, which is. If you go back to 2007 when GM showed the original Chevy Volt concept, not the production version, but the concept, this is exactly what they described there. Small 3-cylinder engine that would just drive a generator to keep the battery charged once it got depleted, and then the battery and the electric motors would drive the wheels, and also the Fisker Karma, the original Fisker. And it's now sold as the Karma Rivero and a couple of other variations of that. That is also the same kind of configuration where the engine is not mechanically connected to the drive wheels at all. It just turns a generator. It's in some ways it's more complicated. but trying to do a 40 kilowatt hour battery pack in most vehicles and have a small engine for a generator would probably be too much to package. Although I do expect that we are going to see something like this on the truck side, particularly with Stellantis, with the Ram pickup. They're going to show a concept version of this next month at CES. And last year, when Stellantis had their EV day, they hinted at a range extended version of the Ram EV. And I think we will see something like this on the truck side, having a small engine range extender to keep the battery charged once it gets depleted. But those are much larger vehicles, and where that would be handy on something like the Ram is for towing. Because this is the problem with towing, is you lose so much range when you hook up a big trailer, that having a range extender would be a huge benefit in that case. The BMW i3, they used a 2-cylinder Boxer motorcycle engine as their range extender for that one, and once you got into extended range mode, it didn't have enough power, so you didn't have the full power of the vehicle available to you. So
45 miles an hour.
Yeah, you had limited performance with that because the engine was so small. Couldn't drive a big enough generator to actually be all that useful.
Yeah.
The reality is, maybe for you, Bren, a plug-in hybrid doesn't make sense. But I think there's also a lot of people for whom it makes huge sense. I mean, if 75, 80% of all daily driving is less than 40 miles. If you have a 40-mile electric range, 35 to 40-mile electric range, that hybrid is going to be, that plug-in hybrid is going to meet most of your driving needs just on pure electricity without ever using that engine. And some hybrids, are what we call through-the-road hybrids, where instead of the more complex drive unit where the motors are integrated into the transmission, like the Toyota-style hybrids, you have the Volvos, which have a through-the-road hybrid system. So it has just the conventional transmission and engine driving the front wheels, and then an electric motor on the rear axle. And there's no mechanical connection between them. So when it's in electric mode, it's only driving off the rear axle, driving purely electrically. The engine's not doing anything at all. It's just along for the ride. In that case, the latest versions of those will do about 33 to 36 miles on a charge, which again, for most people, is going to be sufficient to meet their daily driving needs. And you will very rarely ever turn on the engine.
Yeah, it's. I think people think they drive a lot further than they actually do, just because traffic. They're like, well, I spent an hour in traffic. I'm like, how far is your work really?
Yeah.
And they look it up online. They're like, oh my god, it's only 15 miles.
Yeah.
They're like, we end up, a lot of us drive not nearly as far as we do during our daily drive. My brother has a Volt. He loves that thing, and after when he has a pretty far commute actually. I think he does 30 something. But, his drive there is electric. At work, he could charge it for a long time until they figured out he was just plugging it into the wall at work, and he can't do that anymore. But I think there and like some of the way back, like it was electric, and then, it was gas after that. And then COVID happened, and he worked from home. And at one point, the car just told him, you need to use up all the gas because you haven't used the gas in your car. Because he was just using it as just driving around town, like taking care of things. And so because he's not doing that long commute anymore, like he wasn't using the gas. The gas was going bad. So he had to actually use, the car was like, I have to use up all this gas because it's going bad. And then you can use the electric car. So there are a lot of people, and I think people are still sort of afraid of electric cars for a lot of reasons. I think we haven't, as a society, we haven't done a pretty great job at explaining how they actually work and how everything works and charging at home, etc. And so when you have these, well, I can still charge, but I still have that gas, so I can still do that other thing. And Americans buy cars for edge cases. That's
Yeah.
what if I want to go on a drive? What if there's an emergency? What if if you live in Northern California, where there's a fire and I have to evacuate? My electric car's not going to get me there. Whereas I have a plug-in hybrid. I know that every day I'm just using electric, but when something happens, I have that gas, that tried and true decades, over 100-year-old gas engine. It's ready to rock. So I think there's maybe for most people they're getting a plug-in hybrid, which they really could have just got an EV. But if it gets people into the getting used to plugging it in every night, and it gets people to understand that they're not driving nearly as far as they thought they were. If it's 40 miles and they realize they're never using gas, and they're like, oh, well, maybe my next car should be an EV, and this will be the car for road trips. And so logically I can understand but no one buys cars based on logic, to be honest.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I mean, we wouldn't have Miatas and BRZs and if it was for logic, we'd all be driving Camrys.
Yeah, or RAV4s.
We'd all be driving RAV4 Primes.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we will have Nicole back with us. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
When I deployed, I didn't realize that even the air I was breathing was dangerous. Since coming home, I've watched friends get sick and struggle to get the support they deserve. But now, that's finally changing. We're eligible for new VA healthcare and benefits based on when and where we served. Even though I feel okay, I'm going to apply. For my sake and for my family. Learn more and apply today. Visit va.gov/PACT.
You know how great your house looks and smells when it's just been cleaned? So fresh. And somehow, a clean house makes your head feel fresher too. With a housekeeper from Care, you can reset your house and your head as often as you like for less than you think. Find a great housekeeper, set a schedule that works for you, and check cleaning off your to-do list so you can put your mind to other, more fun things. Get the housekeeping help you need at Care.com.